On the first trip, we were held hostage for 9 days in Africa, in the Congo.
Welcome to the Upgraded Investor Series. My guest today is Jim Rogers, the legendary investor and best-selling author. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm delighted to be here, Ree. It's my pleasure, my honor.
So the first question I wanted to start with is, how are you seeing the world today in terms of the financial markets?
Well, look out the window, Ree. It's a mess. There are problems. If you can't see them out the window, don't worry, they'll be here. Well, we've had a lot of money printing in the last decade or so, and therefore financial markets have been strong for the most part. But now it's beginning to, the central banks are starting to realize maybe we should do something else. The financial markets are starting to realize maybe we can have a bear market. I would suspect it's not here yet, but it's getting closer and closer. Maybe, the part of the situation now is there's a huge amount of pessimism around, and that usually something happens to lift the pessimism, and you have a big rally. I don't know, peace in Ukraine. That's not a prediction. I'm just as an example of something that could happen to lift the pessimism. And once the pessimism is lifted for whatever reason, you have a big rally, but that's probably the last rally because we've had a very long 13 years now, which is the longest in American history anyway. So who knows? We're probably getting towards the end. I see the signs of an end. Not selling or selling short yet, but I can certainly see it's going to end someday.
So how are you seeing this war play out? I think you've said before that you think that the odds of peace in Ukraine, it seems quite likely. I'm wondering what you're looking at to give you sort of signs of this.
Well, mainly what I have, my view is that this is a foolish war, but nearly all wars have been foolish when we look back on them for the context of history. I don't see who's going to get anything out of this war. So maybe it will end, but somebody has to put them together and say, okay, guys, let's finish this. Mr. Putin, there are parts of Ukraine that historically were much more Russian. So maybe if he got them back, but of course, Ukraine doesn't want to give them up. Anyway, if something happens without anybody losing too much face, we could have peace because it's a pretty foolish war. And if we have peace in Ukraine, food prices will come down, energy prices will come down, we'll have a big rally in the markets. Could be a huge rally, but that will be the last rally.
You think that peace in Ukraine would be potentially followed by the cutting of interest rates, since if food prices coming down, energy prices come down, the central banks can say, hey, look, there's no more inflation, let's bring down interest rates again. And then that will even more, spur on the rally.
Well, they'll certainly stop raising interest rates so strongly as they have been. That I don't know if they'll lower interest rates quickly, but they'll certainly, the big push to raise interest rates dramatically will end, and that will mean that the rally will be very strong because people will say, oh, okay, so now everything is okay. No inflation, no interest rates going up, no money tightening. Hooray, hooray, hooray. But that'll be the last. It could be a big rally. I mean, in 1999, when the NASDAQ, towards the end of that crazy bull market, the NASDAQ doubled or tripled in 6 months. I mean, it was insane what was happening. So when you have the blow off in any market, it's really crazy.
Where do you think the biggest shorting opportunities will be during that time, during this blow off, or the best hedge?
Well, usually the things that go up the most and get wildly overpriced, or people get wildly excited about, are the best shorts in the next bear market. I mean, the names. It's Amazon, Apple. I mean, the names of the FANGs. They were called FANGs once upon a time. Those are the things that have been the most exploited, and that's where you'll have the best success on the short side, especially if you can find ones where the fundamentals are changing. Facebook may be changing. They seem to be losing clients. If has been a huge had a huge bull run, and now the fundamentals are changing. That's the kind of stock that really collapses in a bear market.
You think the US dollar will weaken during the blow off, and then once this very big bear market comes, it will strengthen in a really big way?
No, actually, I feel the US dollar will strengthen because everybody looks for a safe haven in times of turmoil. Now, they think that US dollar is a safe haven for historic reasons. It's not a safe haven. The US is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and it's getting worse every day. But people think it's a safe haven. So I own a lot of US dollars, expecting that it will get much stronger during the turmoil. If there is more turmoil, people will bid it up to create. It could turn into a bubble. It could certainly get very overpriced. And I hope I'm smart enough to sell it if it does, because it's a very, very flawed currency.
Are there any particular currencies that you really like at the moment, or that you think will do particularly well over the next 5-10 years?
Many people in the world are looking for something to compete with the US dollar for political reasons and fundamental reasons. I'm looking for what is going to compete with the dollar. If you know, please don't announce it on this show. Send me a telegram, send me an email later. I don't know what it's going to be. In theory, the Chinese currency should be the one, but it's a blocked currency. I mean, you can't just go online and buy and sell it like you can the euro or something. So I don't know what it's going to be. I assure you, I look for it every day.
What do you think of the odds of a commodity-backed currency? Something like
Well, we've done that in the past. We've had silver-backed currencies. We've had gold-backed currencies in the past. They might try that if we get really desperate. Part of the problem with something like a gold-backed currency is it's tough. You know, it requires discipline from the politicians, and they don't like it. The reason the gold standard has never worked is because it requires too much discipline, so they just change the rules. The politicians always change the rules. Now, we might try it again if we get really desperate, but whatever we try is not going to work because politicians like to be able to change the rules whenever they want to.
Aside from preparing our portfolios, how do you think listeners should prepare personally for the biggest bear market in your life?
Well, people, everybody wants a hot tip. Everybody wants to be rich this week, including me. I want to be rich this week too. But I will tell every listener, viewer, that do not invest on hot tips. Do not use hot tips. If you want to be successful in the market, just stay with what you know. Everybody watching this knows a lot about something, whether it's fashion or cars or something. If you stay with what you know, and when you see something change that you know is going to work, then you do a little more research, and that's how you get rich. Now, people will say, but that's boring. Be boring. If you want to be rich, be boring. Don't listen to hot tips. And Rhea, I will tell this people, and invariably, they'll all say to me, you're right. But just one hot tip. Just one. It's amazing. It's amazing. So stay away from hot. Just stay with what you know if you want to be successful.
What are the actual scenarios that you sort of see playing out during this bear market? I mean, like, are you seeing something closer to? I mean, I know we clearly have more debt than we've ever had, but in terms of our day-to-day life, is there anything that people you think should be preparing for on that level? So, for example, do you see potentially major shortages in agriculture, in energy?
Well, what will happen once the bear market sets in again? The central banks will then start printing a lot more money to try to save themselves. They don't care about us. They want to save their jobs is what they will try to do. And that will cause more inflation. And the way to protect yourself during inflation is to own the things that go up in price: agriculture, silver, gold, whatever it happens to be. That's how you protect yourself. and they will print money because that's all they know. It's not good for the world, but they don't know anything else. But in 2008, we had a big problem, big bear market because of too much debt, as you have alluded to. Since 2008, the 2009, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed. I mean, it's unbelievable how much more debt there is now. So the next bear market has to be a really, really bad bear market because of all the debt.
But do you think, what kind of, I guess, social implications and potentially political implications do you see for this playing out?
Well, the history is pretty clear. The governments will change. You might even have countries fail. Some countries, Sri Lanka might be failing right now, you know, when the debt gets higher and higher and the interest rates go higher and higher. Countries fail, governments certainly fail, companies fail. We'll have more bankruptcies. I mean, go back to every big bear market in history, and there have always been companies that fail and go bankrupt. I mean, I'm not trying to scare people, I'm just telling you how it works. Just read your history of bear markets. It's pretty simple and straightforward.
What do you think would be the biggest risks, or where do you see the biggest risks in the US? Do you see any risks of something like, civil war?
Well, there's always risk of civil war, potentially, but I don't see, if the US is going to have civil war, I would suspect other countries would have it first. We would have warning that it's coming, because there are other countries that are less stable than the US even.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't mean the US cannot get completely unstable. We've had some people in government now and previously who are pretty unstable people and could be unstable. So yeah, we could have it, but no, I suspect we'll have warning. It'll happen in other places first.
How are you seeing tensions between the US and China playing out, and particularly with this whole sort of Taiwan thing that's kind of flaring up right now?
Well, I mean, I don't know why US politicians keep hitting China in the face. I mean, I don't know why many Americans might get killed. Lots of terrible things might happen over Taiwan. I don't know why we need it. It looks to me like, I mean, if I were China, and I'm not, so I don't know what they're going to do, but if I were China, I'd just get out a globe and look at the globe and say, we'll wait. Don't worry, we've been here a few thousand years. We'll just wait as long as it's necessary, because it's going to be part of China again someday. I know it will be. They know it will be. Everybody knows it will be somewhere if they just wait long enough and if they're patient enough. So I don't know why American politicians want to get a lot of people destroyed over Taiwan, because we don't need it. They're doing quite okay on their own, Taiwan, that is, and China. So it could lead to war. I mean, stranger things have happened and will happen, I'm sure. But I certainly don't want any American destruction because of Taiwan, not because of anything, but certainly not because of Taiwan. But that doesn't mean, I mean, those guys in Washington don't know anything. You see, Nancy Pelosi went off to Taiwan. She has no idea why she went, other than to get attention to herself. So I will say that the head of Korea refused to see her, which is certainly took a lot of bravery and strength, and I applaud President Yuan for refusing to see a warmonger.
What do you think it's going to take for these tensions to ease? And do you think that it's going to happen anytime soon, I guess?
The problem is that whenever things go wrong in countries, they start blaming foreigners. The politicians blame the foreigners because it's very easy to blame the foreigners. The politicians say it's not our fault. It's not your fault. It's the foreigners. All of these problems are caused by the foreigners. And that's when they start shouting at each other and hitting at each other. And that's how shooting wars start. Trade wars usually first, and then shooting wars. And things are going to be very bad next time we have a problem, because there's so much debt everywhere. And I mean, it should not happen, but None of these wars should have happened. And politicians will shout at each other about the foreigners, and we could very well have a serious war in the foreseeable future. Just because things are going to be so bad at home for many countries, and they'll have, well, they don't have to, but they will then blame the foreigners, and that leads to more and more animosity. You should be worried.
I'm very worried.
Okay, good. Me too.
For the very worried people out there, are there any particular countries that you see as being like me? Okay, let me rephrase it. How do you see Singapore in all of this? Do you think that they'll remain relatively neutral with rising tensions?
Well, if it's an Asian war, Singapore's not in a good shape because Singapore is the most important port in Asia. If it's a South American war, Singapore will be okay. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll be a South American war. I think it's more likely to be an Asian war. And get out of the globe, you'll see who's going to have a problem, including Singapore.
So London was a place to be during the rise of the British Empire, New York during the US. Where do you think the next great city is going to be? Is there any particular country that you're very optimistic about over the next decade?
Well, for war, I mean, someplace like Colombia in the mountains, it's in the Andes, and people don't like to fight wars in mountains. So probably Colombia will be less bad than other places. And at the moment, anyway, I don't think anybody's anti-Colombia. So that would be a possible choice to sit out the next war. I mean, it's hard in North America. It's hard to find a place. You could say Vancouver or something, but North America, if America's in the war, everybody else in North America is going to be in the war too, whether they like it or not. Likewise in Asia, we've discussed Asia. So I guess if we're going to sit it out, we should try Colombia or maybe one of the African countries. The problem with that is in 1938, there was a guy in Paris who saw that the whole thing was going to collapse. So he got out his globe, found himself a South Sea island, left Europe, left Paris for the South Seas to escape the war. The name of the island that he found was Guadalcanal, which was the site of the bloodiest and longest war in the Pacific War.
That's so the guy was a genius.
Yeah, well, he was a genius. That's the problem with being a genius sometimes, you might really, really, really mess it up. So I don't know if I could tell you where to sit it out. It might be the next Guadalcanal.
How can you put a number in terms of I guess probability? So how worried you are that this might come to fruition?
War? Oh, I know we'll have war. We've had wars for hundreds of years. America, to pick a country, was founded in 1789. And every year, but I think 17, since 1789, America's been at war with somebody. Washington, they like war. I don't particularly like war, but they love it in Washington. So it's a very good chance that America will be at a war. Whether it's a big war or a little war, doesn't matter that much. War is war, and they're very destructive. So there's a very good chance that America will be at war in the next decade. I would say 100% chance, just because we always are. I'm not suggesting I approve of that. I'm just telling you that it always seems to happen.
What are you most optimistic about right now?
Colombia. And Colombia is a big drug center as well. And marijuana is becoming legal, as you know, in much of the world now. So there are reasons to be optimistic about Colombia. It has a lot of agriculture as well, and I'm optimistic
a lot of resources.
About agriculture. If you're farmers are probably going to have a good time for a decade or two coming up now. So that's another reason to think about Colombia. I mean, there are countries, Uzbekistan. I've started investing in Uzbekistan recently. It's in Central Asia. It's probably going to be okay. Now, they're a former Soviet republic, but they're not particularly keen on Moscow now. So they probably won't get sucked into a new war. There are countries out there and places out there. Just have to be very careful. Remember the Guadalcanal story.
Can I ask you what particularly in Uzbekistan are you investing in tourism or?
Well, Uzbekistan will become one of the great tourism countries of the world. It's got some unbelievable tourist sites. I mean, nothing much happened there because under the Soviet Union, because you know the story of the Soviet Union, not much happened anywhere. But they were a Soviet republic, but they have some unbelievable, some of the greatest tourist sites I've ever seen. And I've been to a few places. So it certainly has tourism, it has agriculture, it has natural resources, it's got commodities, it's got everything coming out of its ears. And it's cheap because it's been so badly, horribly managed for the past many decades. The disaster.
How does one invest in Uzbekistan? I guess they have their stock exchange. Would that be the best avenue for international investors to pick up?
Well, they do have a stock exchange. They're trying to develop it now. A whole new attitude is taking place in the government. But I mean, go there and become a farmer. If you like being outdoors and getting dirty, go become a farmer. A lot of people love farming. I'm not going to do it because I'd fail at farming. But just about any possibility you can imagine they have in Uzbekistan because it's been such a disaster for so long. Or North Korea, go to North Korea. If you're an American, you cannot go to North Korea, but that place is changing too. There are probably great opportunities in North. Not for me, I'm an American, but for other people, it might be a great opportunity.
If you were going to do another world trip today, I know you've done several with the motorbike and with your converted Mercedes. How would you go about it?
That's a very, very interesting question. I guess I would do it in a car because I would want to take my kids with me when they're older. I would probably do it in a car because then I could we could have a family trip around the world. That would probably be the answer, yes.
It'd be in an SUV?
What?
In an SUV?
Well, I guess it would be an SUV. Yeah, that would be the most practical because you need clearance above the ground, and you need 4-wheel drive, and you need diesel to go around the world. Yeah, that'd probably be an SUV.
What was your biggest if you could, I guess, sum it up, what was your biggest takeaways from doing these world trips? I guess change your perspective in some way?
Well, I'm a little nuts. I like adventure, I like to do strange and different things. A lot of people don't. One of my friends said, "Why are you going to drive around the world? Why don't you just fly? Why don't you just fly to all these places?" And that was certainly his mentality. And he meant it. That's what he would have done. I wanted to see it close to the ground and have the adventure, see the world from the ground up. So and the takeaway here, the main takeaway is we're all the same. It's amazing. We're all afraid of each other, but we're all the same. If we all sit around drinking and dancing, we have a good time. We like each other. We don't get into fights. But as long as we're just sitting around listening to politicians, politicians love to stir up how bad those evil foreigners are. And that's easy because they have different skin, different hair, different eyes, different language, different food, different clothes, different everything. So it's very easy to stir up foreign animosity. But if you get out there and start drinking beer together and dancing, singing, everybody's the same. Everybody wants a good life for their kids. Everybody wants to show off their kid. No, we're all the same.
What's the craziest thing that sort of comes to mind first about that happened that comes to mind about that trip?
Well,
I know there are many, many crazy things, but what's the first?
I was going to say it's 5 years. How long do you have? On the first trip, we were held hostage for 9 days in Africa, in the Congo. We were held hostage by the sheriff, by the police chief.
They were trying to shake you down.
Money.
Yeah,
he wanted money from us. He thought we must be rich people. So here was the police. He was very nice.
He wasn't wrong.
He took us home to what?
He wasn't wrong though.
Yeah. Well, he took us home to dinner. His wife cooked us dinner. He took us to the nightclub. We had all sorts of things. When we knew we couldn't leave, there was no way out of there. But we were there 9 days. Finally, we convinced him we didn't have any more money. And so he took us down and put us on a flat car, and off we went. He told the locomotive, don't let them off. Don't let them off until they get to such and such a city. There we were, on our way out, run out of town on a rail. We went through many war zones on these trips. And so, there are plenty of, not just being held hostage and by the police, but there were lots of war zones. Don't think we weren't scared very, very often.
So, given the benefits and also the potential risks, is this something that you want for your daughters to do as well, to do a similar kind of world trip, or would you kind of...
Well, I hope that my daughters are adventuresome. I hope they want to see the world. I hope they want to learn about the world. But if you're going to see the world and learn about the world, there's some risk. This is not a trip to Washington to see the Washington Monument or something. If you're going to go out there and see the world, you're probably going to have some what you call risk, and what I agree is risk. It's not going to be that simple. So if you don't want to have to worry about things like that, stay home or just go to Washington and see the Lincoln Memorial. Well, one is now in university, and she insisted that she go. In fact, she insisted she go to Columbia University since she was 4 years old, and she insisted, since we took her to Asia, so she would know Chinese. She has insisted that she go to university in America because, as she puts it, we deprived her of her American youth. And so she now wants to have an American youth at an American university. And I said to her, when you're about 50, you're going to turn and say, thank goodness you deprived me of my American youth. But right now, she's 19, or she was 17 when she was making those decisions. So now she's very happy. She's in New York, she's at Colombia, and she's having a wonderful time. I have nothing to do with it. I would have, well, who knows what I would have done, but that's what she wanted, and so I was very keen. Well, I was inclined for her to go to Beijing University, which is, big time place, probably harder to get into than any other university in the world right now. That's just because I wanted them to know Asia and speak very good Mandarin. Now, part of the problem is they already speak very, very, very good Mandarin. They speak better Mandarin than most Chinese. So in retrospect, there's really no reason for her to go to Beijing other than to know China better and maybe speak better Mandarin, but she already speaks perfect Mandarin. So, no, I'm very keen on Colombia. So if that's what she needed, let her do it.
You've said before, as America was sort of growing up, had civil wars, you had two major world wars and so on. Do you think there's a major crisis coming up in China? Do you think that they will allow bankruptcies? Or do you think with the Party Congress coming up in China in November, you think that they might try to prop up markets? How are you sort of seeing that situation?
Well, China has said that they will let people go bankrupt, and I hope they mean it. I wish America would let people go bankrupt. The Chinese communists are better capitalists than we are in the U.S. We won't let people go bankrupt. We save everybody. They say they're going to let them, and they seem to be doing it. They're certainly going to have problems. They've had huge real estate bubble. A lot of debt has built up now. But remember, we in the United States became the most successful country in the 20th century. But my goodness, we had problems along the way. We had civil war, many depressions, many bankruptcies. Could buy and sell Congress. Well, you can still buy and sell congressmen, but they were cheap. In the old days, you could buy 4 or 5 for the price of one. Now we had many problems, and we became extremely successful. Sure, China's going to have a lot of problems, but I don't see anybody else that will be the next great country in the world besides China. I don't see Russia. I don't see anybody else.
What do you think are going to be the biggest changes that we'll see in the next decade or so, especially any particularly surprising things?
Well, I think the NFL is not going to be the most popular sporting league in the world in the next 10 or 20 years. No, the world is changing. If the changes that are taking place in Asia are dramatic and pretty amazing. First went to China in 1984, and that country has gone. It's disappeared. It's a whole different world now, totally different world. But that's happening nearly everywhere now, including in Europe and in the West as well. In the 1970s, the last time we had inflation, America was a creditor nation still. Now we're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. There was no China in the 70s that anybody thought about very much. Soviet Union still was a power, we thought. And all of that is totally changed now. And the world's an entirely different place. But if you go back in history, that's always happening. In one of my books, I talk about you can pick any year in history, and everything that people thought 15 years later was wrong. Everything is. I think of 1900. Everything people thought in 1900 was totally false in 1915. 1915, everything was totally false in 1930. So the world is always changing and changing dramatically. If we want to be successful, we have to figure out how it's going to change so that we can be successful too. So I assure you, you look out the window, whatever you see today, not going to be there in 15 years. It's going to be totally different. In every bull or every bear market, in every market, people are convinced about such and such is going to be the case. It used to be something called the Nifty 50 in America. There were 50 stocks that every bank trust department knew would go up forever. They knew that no multiple was too high to pay for some of those stocks, and they did. And of course, many of those stocks don't even exist anymore, and they certainly are not the Nifty 50 anymore. You know, Avon Products was one of the Nifty 50, a cosmetics company, door-to-door selling cosmetics that sold at huge prices because everybody knew, they absolutely knew it could never go down and they would always have huge earnings. You probably haven't even heard of Avon Products, but I'll tell you, one time, every bank trust department in America owned it and wanted to buy more.
What do you think are the biggest, what do you think are the most important questions that investors should be asking themselves in this environment to avoid things like that, you know, those pitfalls?
I told you, avoid hot tips.
Yeah.
Don't listen to hot tips. And it takes discipline, but if you stay with what you know, you will be successful. But that's, I mean, it's that simple. It's that difficult. Don't think it's easy, but I'm saying it is simple. If you just stay with what you know, if I told you can only have 20 investments in your life, Marie, you'd be very careful. You wouldn't be jumping in and out of things every time you heard something new. You would be very disciplined, very careful, and you'd probably be very rich. Nobody wants to hear that, Ree.
It's too boring.
Nobody wants to hear that.
They just want the next hot tip.
They want a hot tip.
What's hot right now?
Just give me one.
So just to change tack a little bit, I mean, I'm very curious. What does your day-to-day routine look like?
Well, I try to take my daughter to, we have one daughter at home now. She's 14. Try to take her to school every morning, which means getting up early. Try to have dinner with her every night. But if I'm off making a speech somewhere, then I like tomorrow I'm going to Korea, South Korea, for a few days. I'll be making some speeches and appearances in South Korea. It just depends on if I'm here. That's a different life from if I'm on the road speaking or doing other things.
From when you're usually at home in Singapore?
Well, these days, nearly always, because there's no place to go. And if there is a place to go, you can't get there. There are no flights. That's changing, of course. Everybody's opening up now, but for a couple of years there, I mean, the last time I was in China was January of 2020. And now, by the way, I was in Wuhan, where the virus began. Yes, I was speaking to 1,000 people. I thought they'd cancel the speech. But everybody showed up, including, I mean, maybe everybody's dead now, except maybe I'm dead, for all I know. But no, we had a wonderful time. But there I was in Wuhan, January of 2020.
That's fascinating. I had no idea about that.
Well, you should have gone to Wuhan. I would have bought you a beer.
I would gladly have accepted.
There was plenty of beer. There was plenty of beer in Wuhan in January of 2020. They didn't know that they were the center of a disaster.
Yes, it goes back to your point about how everything changes and how futile can be sometimes to try and predict things, isn't it?
It's absolutely just, again, back to what I said, but just stay with what you know. Even then, you'll have problems and make mistakes, but you're much less likely to make mistakes than listening to our tips.
Yeah. Can I ask if there's any particular focus or any particular topic that you're researching at the moment? Anything you're doing, deep dives into?
Well, I'm trying to find new countries. I told you about Uzbekistan, but it's difficult now. I am thinking about Sri Lanka since it's collapsing. I have learned in life that if you invest in a country in collapse, in catastrophe, you usually do fine if you have staying power. I would like to invest in Russia and Ukraine right now, but obviously I cannot. I've also learned that if you invest in countries near the end of a war, you're probably going to be very successful if you have staying power. And either side, if you invest in the losing side or the winning side, everything is extremely depressed when countries are at war. But I cannot invest in Ukraine or Russia right now. I would like to invest in North Korea. I'm going to South Korea, as I said, tomorrow, but I would like to go to North Korea. I've been to North Korea a couple of times. Cannot go now because now it's illegal for Americans to go, but I would certainly love to go back to North Korea to find opportunities. There are things out there, I hope, where one could do things, but some of it's, I'm a citizen of the land of the free. We're not so free. Forget everything you learned in civics class or in listening to the national anthem. A lot of that is good for civics class, but it's not reality.
Okay. Is there any question that you feel that that you want to answer that I haven't asked? Any unasked question?
Yeah. What's the next currency?
Yeah.
What's going to be the next currency? It changes every 100. It's always changed every 100 years or so. Time is coming up. I need to know that. We all need to know that. That's one question I would certainly have. And give me some new countries. It's hard to find new countries now where one can make a viable investment.
You think China will eventually open up the renminbi and make the RMB a major contender to be the next reserve, or you think that's not something that they really...
The surprise to me has been that they haven't done it yet. They've been opening up since 2005 in the investment world, but this is 2022, not 1922, this is 2022. And the surprise to me is that they haven't opened more and more and more. Yeah, any day. But I said that last year too. I said that the year before. I don't know why they're not. I mean, why they're, I know the historic reasons why, but as I said, this is not 1922. This is 2022 now. But you cannot be a dominant world power with a blocked currency and blocked markets. You eventually, something has to change. Either you go into decline or you open up.
And on a positive note, what are the lessons that you've learned from fatherhood?
Teach your children Chinese. Um, my kids are teenagers. In their lifetimes, China and Chinese is going to be extremely important, whether we like it or not. And a lot of people don't like it, but it doesn't matter whether we like it. It's going to happen, and I cannot live my life or invest based on what I want. I have to base my life and my investments on what's happening, on reality. And whether we like it or not, I don't see anybody else that can be the next great country in the world besides China. It's not going to be India or Russia or any of those, or North Korea. It's going to be all I can to repeat. Teach your children and grandchildren Chinese.
All right. Well,
whether we like it or not.
We have to look at reality, not how we want things to be, but how they are.
That's exactly right. And I wish those people in Washington would stop trying to get into fights with half the world.
The world would be a better place.
Well, China and America made a huge amount of money between 1980 and 2015, say. And then that all started changing with Mr. Trump picking a fight. But we could make a lot of money for them and for us if we work together instead of getting into fights.
Yes, that would be the ideal situation if we cooperated with each other and enlarge the GDP instead of trying to pick a fight with each other and make the whole world a worse place.
We could go and drink beer and sing and dance.
In Wuhan.
In Wuhan, yes, in Wuhan. Yes. Actually, Wuhan's a nice city. I've been there 3 or 4 times. I didn't know how famous it was going to become. But
so many people have never heard of Wuhan. It's like 10 million people, 20 million people or something, isn't it?
Well, it is an interesting, it's a very interesting point you just made. There's many cities in China that have 5 or 6 or 8 million people that nobody's ever heard of. I mean, it'd be the largest city, one of the largest cities in America. Wuhan would, I guess, would probably be the largest city in America if it were in the UN. Few people have ever heard of it. And for the many like that, it's astonishing what's happened to China in the last 100 years.
It really is, and the perspectives that you get in the US, and the perspectives that you get in China, it's very hard to see the reality of the situation. I think from both sides to see what's actually going on.
As I say, if we would just all drink and dance together, we'd have a lot more fun. And we'd get rich.
Yes, that's the drinking solves a lot of problems.
Well, in China, they have something called Maotai, which they love. Alcoholic drink. I don't particularly like it, but that doesn't solve my problems. Good beers would solve my problems. Good wine, but not Maotai. They love it. They love what I think the most expensive stock in the world is the company in China which makes Maotai, because they love it so much. I don't.
Yes, there's also this culture of kind of chugging it in one hit, binge drinking Maotai, which is pretty hard to do.
It's hard for me to do, yeah. But listen, there are plenty of Americans who know how to chug it too. I've been to plenty of people who outdrink me in the US as well as in China.
Nice. Well, I've taken too much of your time because it's been such a pleasure talking to you. And I really hope we can do this again. Thank you so much, Jim.
Well, thank you, Rhea. I'll see you in Wuhan. Okay.
I'll see you in Wuhan. I'll buy you the beer next time.
I'm not drinking Maotai. I'll drink beer with you, but not Maotai. All right, thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Jim.
Good fun.